Following its brief network beta in February, we now have the final release of Elden Ring Nightreign, giving us a fresh chance to assess the console versions. To cut to the chase, there is both good and bad news for Xbox Series X, S, PlayStation 5 and PS5 Pro users. The positive side ultimately comes down to Nightreign's winning gameplay design because, against all odds, developer From Software's multiplayer spin-off works surprisingly well. Barring some ongoing issues with network latency during its first week, causing lag on NPC reactions after a strike at points, this is a well-crafted, Fortnite-inspired twist on Elden Ring. The combat mechanics are instantly familiar, and there's plenty of strategic depth as you spend a 1-hour session leveling up in anticipation of a Night Lord boss. It compels repeat attempts and, crucially, rewards a trio of players who coordinate their character builds well towards that final point. On the downside, there's the state of Nightreign's technology. This is really nothing new to those familiar with From Software's Elden Ring engine and how it operates on console. Its optimization on PS5 and Xbox Series machines is still disappointing, and, much like the network beta, continues to fall short of a target 60 frames per second while exploring the Limveld map. Added to that, there is no support for PS5 Pro here. The PlayStation Store page makes no mention of enhancements for Pro hardware even on release, and that bears out in our tests with no extra modes or optimizations of any sort. It simply runs the base PS5 code, which, as I'll get to, does at least yield some benefits in frame rate and image quality depending on which graphics mode you use. In other words, the wait continues to see any form of support for PS5 Pro by From Software in either Armored Core 6 or Elden Ring. Finally, it's worth noting that the ray tracing mode, included in the main Elden Ring game to allow RT shadows and ambient occlusion, is still absent in Nightreign all round, which is a shame. In terms of how the consoles compare, From Software sticks to its tried and tested settings from the network beta. Here's everything you need in summary. PS5, PS5 Pro and Series X each run at a fixed 4K in their quality modes, while the frame rate mode uses a dynamic setup that drops their resolution to 1440p lowest in order to better hit 60 FPS. Likewise, for Series S, 1440p is a fixed target on its quality mode, while Series S's frame rate mode allows for a more flexible 1008p to 1440p range to improve performance. Beyond these resolution differences though, all machines run at identical settings, with a few exceptions. Firstly, comparing PS5 and PS5 Pro, the Pro side has a small benefit in image quality. By running the base PS5 code on more powerful hardware, PS5 Pro tends to hit higher numbers along that 1440p to 4K range. On average, it'll trend higher. This only applies to the frame rate mode of course, though shadows, textures and world detail are identical. Secondly, the Xbox Series consoles show a greater divide in visual quality. The 4 teraflop Series S inevitably takes a bigger visual downgrade in comparison to Series X. It runs with lower resolution global shadows, plus a dropped ambient occlusion setting affecting the shading under grass. Most visible of course is that drop to a 1440p target. Honestly, the turnout is still more than acceptable for Series S, and using the opening tutorial area to match weather and time of day, you're getting the full-fat Nightreign experience otherwise. In fact, this is a far better scenario than the last-gen releases. Taking base PS4 as an example of a last-gen release, which wasn't available for testing in the network beta, the overall playability of Nightreign suffers quite a bit by not playing on the latest wave of systems. On PS4, you get significantly dropped shadow quality and lowered foliage density when compared to PS5. The native resolution is typically 900p here, and performance is significantly worse than the base game too. Much like the base game, it is targeting 30 FPS with uneven frame pacing, though in practice the range is 20 to 30 FPS, with a lot of play typically at the midway point. Switching to current-gen performance testing today, there is sadly no significant improvement since the network beta 4 months ago. Using base PS5's quality mode, for example, with a fixed 4K resolution value there, we still have a 35 to 50 FPS range of frame rate while circling the round table hold. Actual combat around Limveld tends to be even more taxing, but this route gives us a way to perfectly match conditions. It's a broadly identical readout to what we had before, though there is one curious exception. Parts of this hub area have been altered, opening out new areas in the final game, and with extra light points and volumetric fog added in this one room as well. As a result, in this one spot, performance drops from 45 FPS in the network beta down to 39 FPS in the final build. Generally speaking though, using the round table hold, there's no provable performance upgrade or downgrade since the beta. Switching to PS5 Pro, comparing the network test against the final build shows much the same issue, though in fairness PS5 Pro was always at least much closer to the 60 FPS mark on quality mode. Ultimately, using the quality mode makes no practical sense on any console. Base PS5 in typical open world play runs at a lower 30 to 45 FPS range, with lurches into the 20s also possible while dropping from the sky. It says a lot here that you won't even see a flash of 60 FPS while looking directly upward to theoretically lower GPU load. Xbox Series X follows the very same trend, with a matching readout to base PS5. 30 to 45 FPS with potential drops under using the quality mode, making it hard to recommend. Series S meanwhile runs at a much more restrictive 30 to 40 FPS range, but essentially hugs the 30 FPS line for most of the round, again with drops into the 20s. And finally, PS5 Pro fares best with a 40 to 60 FPS range, which, while an improvement over the rest of the console quartet, is still outside the ideal VRR range to mask drops. This isn't consistently high enough, and the fixing at a 4K resolution, as crisp and sharp as it is, just doesn't justify this performance penalty. With all consoles compared in a matched run, PS5 Pro comes out best with a 47 FPS reading, while PS5 and Series X occupy a midway point at 35 FPS, and Series S trails behind at 32 FPS. The easier mode to recommend is still the framerate mode, though it's not perfect. Base PS5 in this case runs at between 40 to 60 FPS, which again still does not easily slot into the ideal VRR range. Long passages of play, especially by the dying embers of a round, will veer towards the lower end and visibly lurch to 40 FPS. Series X has the exact same range, but given that Xbox consoles do have a wider VRR window to work with, that is 40 to 60 Hz versus the 48 to 60 Hz on PS5 systems, there is some flexibility to adapt. It's a much smoother, less visibly juddering experience as a result if your display supports VRR. Even Series S benefits in this sense, with so much of its performance running at between 40 to 60 FPS, keeping up pace with the other machines. Last up is PS5 Pro, and to its credit, the Pro hardware produces a 50 to 60 FPS range most of the time, which does fit nicely within Sony's VRR range. The only drawback is these occasional 40 FPS lurches while exploring Limveld, which occur in some rounds more frequently than others, and stick out quite clearly. In relative tests using a matching round table hold route, PS5 Pro in theory has the upper hand with a tighter 60 FPS lock, while PS5 and Series X hover just below the target, and Series S lands at around 50 FPS. Despite having the final release of Nightreign in hand, there's so much left to be desired on the technical front. The remixing of Limgrave's locations to forge Limveld creates a perfect playground for its shortened 1-hour online experiences, but performance on current gen is still lacking. My recommended pick is still the framerate mode, and ideally on an Xbox system where VRR is more flexible to handle a 40 to 60 FPS range. PS5 Pro meanwhile gets to the theoretical best frame rates purely by running the base PS5 code on a more powerful GPU, but it is a disappointment, and there is no official Pro patch in place. It sets a worrying precedent for a new release to neglect Pro hardware entirely, and even as an offshoot to a major game, I did expect more. The state of affairs with the final release of Nightreign then is sadly as we left it. It's an enjoyable ride, no question, an unusual combination of ideas that somehow ties together well, but regardless of your console or mode, a perfectly locked 60 FPS is often out of reach. That's all from me today though. If you did enjoy this video, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell for instant notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality version of this video and many more, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch directly, you know where to find me. But from me for now, thanks for watching.